Hello, it's Jim. Hi. So this video is to show a way that you could make a 1 to 2 tincture, fresh plant, 1 ounce, menstruum, in this case, grain alcohol, 2 ounces in that ratio, even when otherwise you would think it'll never be able to, alcohol will never be able to cover up the herb, and how can I do that? And here's the trick. If I try and do it in this quart jar, which would seem appropriate for this much herb, there is no way when I add the alcohol, it's going to cover it up. It just won't, because the herb will be fluffy in the jar. It'll be poofed up, you know, up to here or something, and the alcohol will only get it maybe, you know, up to here. It'll just never be covered. So a lot of people, what they'll say is like, oh, I tried to do 1 to 2. It doesn't work. There's no way the alcohol covers it. And maybe they'll cut it up smaller, and that might work. It might not. A lot of times it doesn't, honestly. But what you can do, you can use a smaller jar. And what the smaller jar will do is it'll pack the herb. It'll keep it from expanding. And so use a canning funnel because that just makes everything easier. Just so you know, I have washed my hands before doing this. I know that if I was in a certified GMP facility, I'd be writing all this stuff down and wearing gloves and a hairnet and everything, which I'm not doing. But I'm not in a certified GMP facility. So I'm having to push the herb down a little bit. You can see that it's filled up to the brim there. I'll just use a little bit of force, get every last bit of herb that we can. We don't need to be too crazy about it, but I know there's people who will be. I actually often am. I'm going to try and seem less anal right now, but look, I'm picking up little scraps of stuff, and I feel like I need to use my knife and get up all this little stuff, because I don't want to waste plant material, and I want the cool sound effects of the knives on the cutting board. By the way, yes, this is an awesome, really big, beautiful acacia wood cutting board. So I got this in here. I gotta get all the scraps off the metal. It's filled up to the brim. I'm gonna kind of really compact it. And then, look, I gotta get stuff off the spoon. Again, off of the cutting board, a little piece flew out. Let's do that. So now it's pressed down. It's actually fairly pressed pretty good in here. A lot more than it would be if it was in here. It'd be a lot fluffier and puffier and higher in the jar. And now there were 5 ounces of fresh passion flower, leaves and flowers, and tender young vines. And I'm going to pour my 10 ounces of grain alcohol in. Hear the bubbles? I can hear them. They're cool sounding. And what I find is that for not all, but a lot of fresh plants, if you're using quart jars, you can put about 10 ounces of herb in and 20 ounces of grain alcohol. And if you're using pint jars, since a pint is half of what a quart is, you just have that. You'll notice it's filled right up to the brim. Yay, wonderful. Put the lid on, and poof, there it is, all covered up, 1 to 2. I've even done this with really fluffy stuff like mullein leaf, fresh mullein leaf, with calendula flowers, red clover, just the fact that the jar keeps everything compacted will allow you to do a 1 to 2. And doesn't matter a whole lot. The ratio does not determine the quality of your tincture. Your tincture's quality is determined by how awesome the herbs you put in it were, always. What the ratio does is it determines how much herb is in how many ounces or how many drops. So if I made this in the quart jar and it was a lot fluffier and I had to add like another, I don't know, 2 to 4 ounces of alcohol, maybe more depending on which herb it is, maybe a lot more if it's mullein, the quality of the tincture is no less. It's simply you have to take more of it to get the same amount of herb. So the beauty of doing ratios is that batch after batch after batch, year after year after year, it doesn't matter whether one year you cut up your herb more finely or you pressed it down with more force down into the jar and the next year you didn't. Your consistency of your dose from batch to batch to batch, the only variable is going to be the quality of the plant you're using and not something about how concentrated or less concentrated in. So some people will say, oh, a 1 to 2 tincture is stronger. It's not really stronger, it's just more concentrated. And, you know, if you don't care about taking more or it's just easier for you, then, you know, have at it. Just eyeball it. That's fine. But if you think like, oh, but you can't do it because the herb won't be covered. It might just be the size jar you're using. Now, if I use a pint jar and tried to put only 2 ounces in here, that wouldn't work. The whole idea is you want to get it filled right up to the brim. You want to have the herb compacted in the jar, and that's not going to happen if you put 2 ounces in, you know, a pint jar. So for a pint jar, normally 5 ounces of herb, 10 ounces of alcohol. For a quart jar, normally 10 ounces of herb, 20 ounces of alcohol will fill it right up to the brim. Now, you might need to add a little bit of herb or a little bit of alcohol just to get it where you need it to be. You might later on try and put 10 ounces of freshly chopped up fresh melon leaf in a quart jar, and when you got about like 7 ounces in, you're like, there's no way I can fit that last 3 ounces in. But you can, just press it in there. That's how you can make a 1 to 2 tincture, fresh plant, and have the alcohol covering it up. And because I know someone's gonna ask, yes, the alcohol is right up to that lid. You can get a piece of like wax paper and put it under there so that there's not direct contact with the lid. I just didn't have any right here with me at the moment, but I do upstairs. Bye.